Hi, I am Niza Lara, and today I'll walk you through some of the major classical and modern art movements. I'll explain their key artists, when and where they developed, what they believe in, and artwork that represent each one. Classical movements and techniques are traditional style and methods focused on realism, human ideals, and skilled craftsmanship. They include techniques like fresco, tempera, and oil painting. First, naturalism. Naturalism developed during the late Renaissance in Europe. Artists aim for lifelike detail and realistic lighting. Naturalists believe that art should look as close to real life as possible. Human figures, emotions, and nature were shown honestly. So this is Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio. Caravaggio's naturalism was rooted in his revolutionary style of painting directly from life, using ordinary people, even the poor and marginalized, as the models for saints and deities, creating a new level of realism that challenged classical idealism. Here are some examples of Caravaggio's painting. It's called The Calling of Saint Matthew. Shows natural light, real facial expression, and everyday setting. Humanism. During the Renaissance in Italy, when society focused more on human potential and learning, humanism celebrated human experience, beauty, and intelligence. Art focused on anatomy, proportion, and realistic portraiture. This is Leonardo da Vinci. In humanism, stemmed from a Renaissance cultural movements that emphasize human potential and achievement. His approach involved a deep scientific study of the human body through anatomy and focused on depicting realistic emotions, individuality, and the complexity of human experience in his art. Here are some examples of Leonardo da Vinci's artwork called The Vitruvian Man highlights proportion and the study of the human body. Fresco painting. During the Renaissance, especially in churches and public buildings, fresco uses pigments paint on a wet plaster. Artists valued its durability and bright colors. So this is Michelangelo. Michelangelo was reluctantly commissioned by Pope Julius II to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling, even tough. He saw himself primarily as a sculptor, working in difficult conditions from 1508 to 1512. He created a vast fresco covering about 500 square meters and featuring more than 300 figures. The scenes, mainly from the Book of Genesis, include the famous creation of Adam. His sculpture's eye shape the fresco's strong, three dimensions, figure, and dramatic realism. Here are some examples of Michelangelo artwork called The Sistine Chapel Ceiling. Shows large-scale fresco techniques with bold storytelling. Tempera painting. Used widely before oil painting became dominant. Tempera dries fast and creates smooth, matte surface. Artists like its precision and control. So this is Alessandro Di Mariano di Vanni Filippi, also known as Sandro Botticelli. Botticelli learned tempera painting under Fra Filippo Lippi and later worked under Medici Patronage in Florence. Using tempera, sometimes mixed with oil, he creates works like Primavera and the Birth of Venus on popular panels. His styles combined his teacher's influence with classical ideas drawn from the intellectual culture of his time. So here are some examples of Sandro Botticelli artwork called Is the Birth of the Venus, shown fine lines and dedicated color typical of tempera. Oil painting became popular in Northern Europe during the 15th century. Oil paint allowed for deep colors, blending, and detailed textures. So this is Jan van Eyck. Eyck introduced the use of oil as a blender which dried slowly and allowed artists to build a translucent layer for greater detail and luminosity. His mastery of glazing and blending created lifelike texture and light effects, transforming 15th century painting and shaping the work of later artists. Here are some examples of Jan van Eyck artwork called the Arnolfini portrait. Shows rich color, reflections, and detailed fabrics. Modern art movements. Modern art movements, art styles from the late 800s onward that broke away from traditions. These movements explored new ideas, emotions, and experimental ways of creating art. Impressionism emerged in France in the late 800s, focused on light, movement, and capturing a moment. Brushstrokes were loose and the colors vibrant. So this is Claude Monet, a leader of Impressionism, painted outdoors to capture changing light and color with quick brushstrokes. His 1874 work, Impression Sunrise, gave the movement its name after a critic's remark. So this is the example artwork of Claude Monet called Impression Sunrise, highlights quick strokes and natural atmosphere. Post-Impressionism, emerging in the late 19th century, moved beyond Impressionism, naturalism, to emphasize expression, symbolism, and formal structure. So this is Vincent van Gogh. Van Gogh with Impressionism is complex. While he was influenced by the movement, he is more accurately classified as the post-impressionist because he went beyond their techniques to use color and form for intense emotional expression. Here are some examples of Van Gogh artwork called Starry Night Shows, Swirling Lines, and Expressive Color. Cubism. Cubism is the 20th century art movement that revolutionized art by breaking down objects into geometric shapes and showing them from a multiple viewpoints simultaneously. So this is Pablo Picasso and George Braque, co-founded Cubism around 1907 in Paris, inspired by Cézanne and African mask. The style fragmented object into geometric shape, showing multiple viewpoints to challenge the traditional perspective. Here are some examples of the artwork of Pablo Picasso and George Braque in Cubism, called Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. Shows fragmented form and flat shapes. Fauvism, an early 20th century French art movement characterized by the use of strong, non-naturalistic colors and simplified forms, prioritizing emotional expression over realistic presentation. This is Henri Matisse. He discovered painting during recovery from appendicitis, leaving law to pursue art, influenced by Van Gogh and travel. A 1905 summer in Collioure with André Derain led him to Fauvism, marked by bold, expressive colors. Here are some examples of Henri Matisse artwork called Woman with a Hat. Uses exaggerated colors to create mood. Expressionism. Early 20th century Europe focused on inner emotion rather than realistic appearance. Brush strokes are dramatic and intense. Edvard Munch. Munch's childhood trauma and strict upbringing influenced his expressionist art, which explores anxiety, death, and emotional suffering. Breaking from naturalism, he used vivid, distorted imagery to depict psychological state, becoming a figure in expressionism. Here are some examples of artwork of Edvard Munch. The Scream captures anxiety and strong feeling. Dadaism, an early 20th century movement, rejected logic and traditional art using satire, nonsense, and unconventional method like collage, ready-mades, and performance to protest World War I and provoke audiences. So this is Marcel Duchamp, known for works like Nude Descending a Staircase, pioneered Dada with his ready-mades, turning ordinary objects into art. His ironic anti-establishment approach embodied Dada's protest against traditional art and the force behind World War I. Here are some examples of the artwork of Marcel Duchamp, named Fountain. Fountain challenged the idea of what counts as art. Surrealism is an art and cultural movement that emerged in the 1920s, emphasizing the irrational and unconscious mind to unlock creative expression. So this is Salvador Dali. Dali embraced surrealism in the late 1920s, influenced by his art education. Freud's ideas on the subconscious and Parisian artist, he developed the paranoia critical method to depict dreamlike subconscious vision in his work. Here are some examples of Salvador Dali artwork named The Persistence of Memory. Shows melting clocks in dreamlike space. So lastly, pop art. Pop art is an art movement that emerged in the mid-1950s in Britain and the United States, using imagery from popular and mass culture like advertising, comic books, and everyday objects that challenges fine art traditions. So this is Andy Warhol, transitioned from a successful commercial illustrator to a central figure in pop art by embracing popular culture like soap cans, celebrity images, and consumer products, and elevating them to fine art using techniques like silkscreen. Here's some examples of artwork of Andy Warhol named Marilyn Diptyque. Uses repetition and bright colors to reflect celebrity culture. My reflection for overall movement is that the movement that resonates me at the most is Impressionism. I like how Impressionist artists focused on capturing real moments instead of trying to make everything perfect. Their use of natural light and soft, quick brush strokes feel calm and genuine. When I look at works like Monet Impression Sunrise, it reminds me that beauty can be found in ordinary scene if you pay attention. This movement stands out to me because it feels peaceful, expressive, and honest, and it reflects the way I appreciate simple moments in everyday life.